The Wolf Prince ordered Neria Vale to burn the old mate letters. Instead, every letter flew back to her. The first one rose from the fire like a wounded bird, its silver edges burning but never turning to ash. It circled Neria once, then struck her chest with a soft, breathless sound, as if it had finally found the body it had been searching for. Then the second letter rose. Then the third. Then hundreds. The archive hearth exploded into a storm of white gold parchment and blue moonfire. Neria stumbled back, but the letters did not cut her. They circled her like living shields, glowing with old ink, broken vows, and names no one in the royal court wanted spoken. Across the Hall of Records, nobles cried out. High Moon Archivist Saravel went pale. Wolf Prince Caelan Draven stood beyond the hearth, his black ceremonial coat burning with reflected fire, one gloved hand half raised. His eyes were not on the letters. They were on Neria, as if the impossible thing had not surprised him enough. That hurt worse than the fire, because Neria understood at once. He had known something might happen, and he had still put the torch in her hands. Hours earlier, Neria had been sorting damaged court records in the West Archive vault while rain struck the glass ceiling above. She was lowborn, oath-bound, and unclaimed by any house. The Moon Temple listed her as ash servant stock, fit for copying, carrying, cleaning, and silence. Archive girls survived by being useful and forgettable. Neria was both. She had always felt old paper react strangely to her hands. Parchment shifted when she passed. Ink darkened under her fingertips. Once, a torn marriage vow unfolded inside her apron and wrote the word remember across its blank edge. She told no one. Silent girls lived longer in the royal archives. Just after sunset, Saravel summoned her. Bring the old royal mate letters to the lower hearth. Neria froze. The sealed ones? Saravel's pale eyes sharpened. Did I ask you to wonder? No, my lady. The old mate letters were forbidden vows from before the Moon Temple fell. Wolf Soul promises the restored court had declared unstable, dangerous, and treasonous. Neria had never been allowed near them. Until tonight, 2 guards opened the silver-locked cabinet. Inside sat a black cedar chest bound in moon iron. Saravel handed Neria the key herself. The archivist did not touch the chest. That was the first warning. Carry them carefully, Saravel said. Do not read, do not open, do not bleed on them. The warning came too fast. Neria noticed. So did the man in the doorway. Wolf Prince Caelan Draven had entered without sound. He was tall, severe, and watchful, with dark swept-back hair, silver blue eyes, and a black glove on his right hand. The glove was burned at the fingertips. Neria saw it. Caelan saw her see it. Saravel bowed. My prince, the letters will be destroyed before moonrise. Good, Caelan said. Too controlled. Then his gaze moved to Neria. She carries them. Saravel's mouth tightened. The archive girl? Yes. Highborn hands would be more appropriate for royal vow disposal. No, Caelan said. Lowborn hands carried the old court sins long enough. Let the court watch what it asks servants to burn. Neria should have felt defended. Instead, suspicion moved cold through her chest. So she carried the chest into the Hall of Records, where nobles, priests, and wolf lords had gathered to witness the cleansing. The old royal mate letters were not being burned quietly. They were being executed. Neria knelt before the lower hearth and opened the chest. The scent rose first. Dreed lavender, old smoke, vintafua, longing. Inside lay bundles of letters tied with faded thread. Some seals were broken, some names were scratched out so deeply the parchment had nearly torn. A moon priest read the decree. No erased bond shall be restored, no forbidden letter shall be heard, no blood shall answer old ink. At the last sentence, the letters rustled. Answer. Neria heard it clearly. Saravel did too. Burn them, Saravel said. Neria looked at Caelan. She hated herself for doing it. His gloved hand had curled into a fist. Burn them, he said. The words struck harder from him. Neria lowered the torch. For one heartbeat, the first bundle burned normally. Then the fire turned white. The letters screamed, not with voices, with ink. The first letter flew from the flame and struck Neria's chest. Its words burned through her dress, directly over her heart. A name appeared in the air. Maring Vale. Neria stopped breathing. Val. Her name. More letters erupted from the hearth. Some circled her wrists. Some tangled in her hair without burning it. Some spun at her feet like wolves around a lost den. Glowing lines of ink connected every erased bond to the same bloodline. Val. Not royalty. Not crown. Something older than both. Saravel's face twisted. Caesar. The guards moved. The letters opened into a wall of white gold fire, and burning ink rode across the air. Letter blood answers. The hall fell silent. Neria stared at the words, shaking. She did not know what letter blood meant, but Saravel did. Fear crossed the archivist's face before she buried it. Caelan stepped toward the fire. The letters did not attack him. They bent toward his gloved hand. Neria saw then that the burns on his glove were not from flame. They were old vows trying to write through skin. You knew, she whispered. Caelan stopped at the edge of the letter storm. I knew the letters were being destroyed tonight. That is not what I asked. His jaw tightened. Neria's voice broke. You ordered me to burn them because you thought they would answer me. Caelan did not lie. Yes. The letters flared. You used my hands. Yes. Saravel seized the moment. The girl is contaminated. Letter. Blood is forbidden. If those vows return, every arranged alliance in the kingdom can be challenged. Caelan still looked at Neria. Exactly. The court erupted. Then the oldest letter rose from the hearth. Its edges were black, sealed with a crescent moon split in half. Every other letter bowed around it. Saravel stepped back. Caelan Vale. The old letter flew to Neria's throat and opened by itself. A woman's voice filled the hall of records. If this letter has found blood, then the moon temple did not erase us all. Neria's knees weakened. The first vow was not broken by death. The fire turned blue-white. It was broken by the royal house. Every wolf in the hall went still. Saravel whispered, Burn her. The guards drew their blades. Caelan moved through the flame toward Neria, old letters cutting lines of fire across his black coat. His gloved hand reached out not to take the letters, but to shield her from the first blade. Before he could touch her, the oldest letter turned toward him. Its ink changed. A new line wrote itself between them. Wolf Prince Caelan Draven. Unrestored bond detected. Neria's heart stopped. The court saw. Caelan froze. Then the letter turned back to Neria and wrote one final line in burning blue-white ink. His broken mate vow leads to you. The broken mate vow burned through Caelan's glove and wrote Neria's name across his palm. He did not cry out. That almost made it worse. The black leather split from wrist to fingertip as if invisible teeth were tearing it open. Blue-white fire spilled through the seams. Ink rose from under his skin in thin, burning lines, writing over old scars that had never healed properly. Neria Vale. The letters around Neria screamed with paper and flame. Caelan's hand shook once. Only once. Then he closed it into a fist, as if he could crush her name before the court finished reading it. The oldest mate letter did not allow that. It snapped open wider, and every burning page in the Hall of Records turned toward him. A new line wrote itself across the air. A vow cut is still a vow. Neria stared at his palm, chest tight, heart beating too hard against the first letter, still glowing over her dress. You had a mate vow, she whispered. Caelan's silver blue eyes stayed on her. Not on the court. Not on Saravel. On hair. I had a sentence written where a vow should have been. That was not an answer. The letters agreed. They flew between him and Neria, forming a wall of white gold fire. When Caelan tried to step closer, the burning pages struck his chest and forced him back. Not gently. The wolf prince stumbled one pace. The court saw. So did Neria. The letters would not let him reach her while his vow remained unread. High Moon Archivist Saravel recovered first. Enough. The letters are unstable. The girl is waking dead ink. She lifted a silver bowl of temple ash from the nearest priest. Neria saw the ash glow black at the edges. Do not, Caelan said. Saravel smiled without warmth. You ordered a cleansing, my prince. Then she threw the ash at the oldest letter. The ash did not fall. It turned into black rain in midair. Where it touched the burning pages, old ink began to vanish. Names blurred. Vows broke apart. The letters shuddered like living things caught under knives. Neria felt the pain in her chest. Not metaphor. Real. Each erased line burned through the first letter, pressed over her heart. She grabbed it with both hands and gasped. Caelan moved again. The letters blocked him again. This time they wrote across the air in front of his face. Do not shield what you will not confess. Caelan stopped. Saravel's eyes flashed. See? Even the cursed paper knows the prince is bound by law. Neria looked at the letters circling her. At the old vows trying not to die again. At Caelan's burned palm, still carrying her name. She did not understand what she was. But she understood one thing clearly. Everyone wanted to use her hands. Saravel wanted them to burn the letters. Caelan had wanted them to make the letters return. The court wanted them to prove something convenient. Neria lifted her chin. No. The letters stilled. Saravel turned. What did you say? Neria's voice shook, but it held. I am not your fire, and I am not his proof. The first letter over her heart flared. The pain eased. Slightly. Enough. Neria turned toward the storm of burning pages. If you came back because of my blood, then show me who broke the first vow. The Hall of Records fell cold. Caelan went still. Saravel's face changed. Fear first. Then fury. No lowborn girl commands royal mate law. The oldest letter answered before Neria could. She does not command. She asks. The words burned blue-white above the hearth. Then the letters moved. Not all at once. In lines. Like wolves forming a path through snow. The oldest letter rose higher, and its ink unfolded into a vision across the ceiling of the Hall of Records. The old moon temple stood whole beneath a silver eclipse. No broken pillars, no restored priests, no chains around its archive doors. Wolves knelt in pairs before the first vow fire, not arranged by rank or land, but called by soul scent and moon recognition. A woman stood before them holding a letter blade. Not a sword, a blade made for opening sealed vows. Her name burned beneath her feet. First Caelan Draven. The court bowed at the name. Caelan did not. Neria noticed. The vision shifted. Morel stood beside the first royal hearth while a mate letter burned in her hands. On the page were two names, a royal wolf prince and a lowborn moon, scribe girl. The vow between them shone white gold. Morel's face hardened. If royal blood can be bound below itself, she said, then thrones become answerable to hearts. She cut the letter. The page screamed. The mate bond did not vanish. It split. One half was sealed in the royal archive. The other was buried in the bloodline of the moon scribe girl. Neria's breath stopped. Vale. The letters around her whispered the name without sound. The vision changed again. Generation after generation. Mate letters cut. Lowborn names scratched away. Royal heirs married to alliances while true vows were folded into silence. The restored moon temple rose after the old one fell, not to heal the bonds, but to make the cutting lawful. Saravel stepped backward. Too late. Her own name appeared in the vision. High Moon Archivist Saravel. Keeper of unrestored bonds. Not the first breaker. The keeper. Neria turned toward her. You kept them cut. Saravel's mouth thinned. I kept the kingdom from tearing itself apart over inconvenient love. The letters hissed. Caelan's burned hand flexed. Neria looked at him then. And yours? His face closed. The oldest letter turned before he could choose silence. A new vision opened. Caelan, younger, standing alone in the West Archive vault, right hand bare, pressing blood to a half-burned mate letter. His voice was rough, desperate, not princely at all. Restore it. The letter shook in his hand. Then black archive chains shot from the shelves and wrapped around his wrist. Saravel stepped from the dark with a temple knife and cut the vow before it could write the second name. Caelan fell to one knee. The letter burned into his palm. Not enough to restore. Enough to scar. Neria stared. He had tried to restore his mate vow before he knew it led to her, or before he would admit it. The letters turned toward him and wrote. He searched for the bond. He failed. He used her hands when his could no longer open the fire. Neria swallowed. That truth was not clean enough to forgive. But it was not empty either. Caelan looked at her through the burning storm. I knew Saravel would destroy the letters tonight. I knew my hand could not wake them. I hoped yours could. Neria's voice went quiet. So you chose my danger? Yes. The letters flared black at the edges. Caelan did not defend himself. Good. Neria was tired of powerful people explaining harm until it sounded like strategy. Saravel raised both hands. Listen to yourselves. If these letters are restored, arranged alliances fall. Border treaties collapse. Noble houses lose claims built over generations. A kingdom cannot be ruled by old longing. Neria looked at the letters. Some glowed bright. Some were dim. Some were torn so badly no names remained. She understood the trap. If every erased mate bond returned at once, not all would bring healing. Some would break living marriages. Some would expose children as alliance pawns. Some would start wars between houses that had buried truth too long. The letters were not gentle. They were not safe. They were not simply romantic. They were evidence. Neria lifted one hand. The storm slowed. Do not restore all, she said. Caelan looked at her sharply. Saravel blinked. Neria's hand trembled, but she kept it raised. Show what was cut. Show who cut it. Show who still chooses the bond now. No vow returns by force. The oldest letter brightened. For the first time, the fire around Neria did not feel like it was pulling her apart. It felt like it was listening. Caelan's burned palm flared with her name. He clenched his jaw, but did not step forward. The letters around him wrote, Unrestored bond pending. Neria looked at him. Pending means not yours. A shadow of pain crossed his face. I know. Saravel hated that answer. She grabbed the black cedar chest from the hearth and tore open a hidden compartment beneath it. Inside lay a narrow silver needle wrapped in old red thread. Caelan went pale. Saravel no. Neria's chest tightened. What is that? Saravel's smile returned, colder now. The reason letter, blood, should never be left alive. She stabbed the needle into the oldest letter. The entire hall of records screamed. Every burning page froze. Neria's heart lurched as if the needle had entered her own chest. Ink began pouring from the oldest letter, black and thick, spreading across the blue-white flame. The names in the air twisted. Marin Vale blurred. Soren Draven cracked. Elia Vale vanished halfway. Caelan slammed both hands into the firewall. This time he did not try to reach Neria. He pressed his burned palm to the letters and let the old vows right through his skin. The fire ate his glove completely. The court watched as line after line of broken vow ink carved itself across his hand and wrist. He forced the words out through his teeth. Read through me. Neria's eyes widened. The letters hesitated. Saravel's needle sank deeper. Neria understood what he was offering. Not rescue. A price. If the letters could not survive through paper, they could pass through the prince's broken vow and keep speaking. But it would mark him publicly with every cut his royal house had hidden. Neria looked at him across the storm. You do not get to become noble for pain you chose late. His voice was rough. I know. The letters accepted that. They surged toward his hand. Caelan dropped to one knee as burning ink climbed his arm, across his sleeve, up toward the wolf clasp at his throat. The oldest letter tore free from Saravel's needle, but not whole. A black wound split through its center. From that wound, one final line wrote itself in the air. Saravel kept the bonds. First Luna Marilé broke them. The royal house buried the knife. Then the letter turned toward the sealed northern wall of the Hall of Records. Behind that wall, something began to knock. Once. Twice. Hundreds of times. Neria felt the letters around her turn cold. Caelan lifted his head, breathing hard, burned vow ink crawling over his skin. Saravel whispered, Do not open that wall. The oldest letter answered in blue-white fire. The unanswered mate letters are still alive behind it. The unanswered mate letters behind the wall were not stored. They were imprisoned. The northern wall did not crack like stone. It answered. One knock, then another, then hundreds. Each sound struck the Hall of Records with the rhythm of a fist against a sealed door. The burning letters around Neria turned toward the wall all at once, their white gold fire dimming into a colder blue. The oldest letter hovered before her throat, still wounded through the center where Saravel's needle had pierced it. Neria felt the knocking in her chest. Not as noise, as names. Some were faint, some furious, some so old they had nearly forgotten how to be called. They pressed against the silver-sealed wall as if the letters behind it had been listening for generations and had only now realized someone outside could hear them. Caelan remained on one knee near the hearth, burned vow ink crawling over his bare hand and wrist. The letters had marked him publicly, but they still would not let him cross the firewall to reach Neria. His bond remained pending, not restored, not claimed, not his. Neria held on to that thought like a blade. Saravel saw the letters turn toward the northern wall and went still. Do not open it. She did not sound like an archivist protecting records. She sounded like a jailer hearing prisoners wake. Neria looked at her. Why? The archivist's face hardened. Because those letters are unanswered. The oldest letter opened wider. Its ink wrote across the air. Unanswered does not mean dead. A sound moved through the court, low and frightened. Neria turned back to the wall. Through the blue firelight, faint shapes began to appear behind the stone. Folded letters pressed flat in narrow iron cages, each one bound by red thread. Some trembled with weak light. Some beat softly like hearts. Some had names burned on one side and blank spaces on the other, waiting for replies that had never been allowed to come. Neria's throat tightened. They are alive. Saravel's eyes flashed. They are dangerous. No, Neria said. They are trapped. They are tied to living marriages, Saravel snapped. If that wall is broken wrong, every living mate touched by those vows will feel the cut. Husbands will wake beside wives with another name burning under their skin. Children will hear their family lines questioned. Packs will accuse packs. Houses will bleed. The court seized on the fear at once. Neria felt it ripple around her. Saravel had not lied completely. That was what made her words sharp. A buried vow could be a truth. It could also be a knife. If every unanswered letter flew free at once, it could tear living homes apart before anyone chose what to do with the truth. Neria lifted one shaking hand. The letters slowed. Then we do not restore them all. Caelan lifted his head. Saravel stared. Neria's voice grew steadier. Show who still chooses. Show who was forced. Show who is dead. Show who has moved on. No vow returns by force. The old letters around her rustled. Some brightened. Some dimmed. Behind the wall, the knocking changed. Less like fists. More like breathing. Caelan's burned palm flared with her name again. He clenched his jaw and did not move toward her. Good. Neria looked at him through the fire. That includes you. Pain crossed his face. I know. The letters wrote between them. Unrestored bond pending. The words burned white-blue, clear enough for every noble in the hall to see. Saravel's mouth tightened. You speak as if choice can hold a kingdom together. Neria turned toward her. You speak as if cages have. The letters hissed in approval. For the first time, Saravel's composure cracked not with fear, but with something older. Grief. It was gone almost as soon as Neria saw it, but the oldest letter saw it too. A small letter slipped from the wall before the stone opened fully. It was thin, yellowed, and wrapped in faded gray thread. It flew not to Neria, to Saravel. The archivist recoiled. The letter followed. The court watched as it hovered before her chest, trembling. Neria whispered, That one is yours. Saravel's face went colorless. No. The gray thread loosened by itself. A name appeared on the page. Saravel Aufrin. Then another. Marith Vale. Neria's breath caught. Vale again. But not royal. Not crown. Letter blood. Saravel closed her fist as if she could crush the air. That was dead before it began. The letter answered in ink. Rejected before reply. Neria understood then. Saravel had not only inherited the archive's cruelty, she had been shaped by it. A descendant of the first archivist who kept cut bonds, raised to believe unanswered letters were infections. And somewhere inside that system, her own vow had once been refused before the other soul was allowed to answer. Caelan's voice came low. Saravel, do not pity me, she snapped. The letter trembled before her. Neria did not soften. Pain did not make Saravel innocent. It only made her more dangerous. You knew what it felt like, Neria said. And you still kept the wall. Saravel's eyes turned cold again. Because I survived it. Kingdoms survive what hearts do not. The gray-threaded letter dimmed. Neria looked at it and understood another rule. Not every unanswered vow could be restored. Some had been abandoned. Some had been poisoned. Some had been used so long as weapons that opening them carelessly would wound the living more than the dead. She lifted the oldest letter. "Show choice," she said. The northern wall obeyed. A narrow blue-white seam opened through the stone. Behind it, the imprisoned letters began to glow one by one. The first letter flew through and opened in front of the court. A living noblewoman's name burned on one side, a dead border wolf's name on the other. The letter did not restore. It became witness. The noblewoman collapsed, sobbing, as the court saw the truth. She had loved him before her family, married her to a winter lord, but the border wolf was dead, and the letter did not drag her backward. It only returned the stolen memory. The second letter opened. Both names were living. The woman stood in the court beside her arranged husband. The other name belonged to a wolf lord across the hall. The letter waited. Neria did not speak for them. The woman whispered, "I choose the life I built." The letter bowed and folded itself into silver ash. No punishment, no forced bond, only truth accepted and released. The third letter opened. Both names living. Both wolves looked at one another across the hall with tears and terror. "I still choose," one said. "I still choose." The other answered. Their letter did not fly to Neria. It flew between them, hovering but not binding, pending. By consent. The court watched, shaken into silence. The old mate letters were not destroying marriages blindly. They were asking, that was worse for Saravel, because fear had less to hide behind. Caelan's burned hand shook as another wave of vow ink climbed toward his throat. Neria saw him fight the pain and refused to make it her problem. He kept his distance. He kept his silence. He let the letters judge. The oldest letter turned toward the northern wall again. The knocking deepened. A letter larger than the others pressed against the stone from inside. Its seal was not silver or gray. It was red, old red, blood thread red. Saravel saw it and backed away. "No," she whispered. "Not that one." Neria's chest tightened. The red-sealed letter pushed through the opening slowly, as if it had been buried under too many years to remember air. The moment it entered the hall, every other letter bowed lower than before. Caelan rose unsteadily. The vow ink on his hand went still. Neria felt the letter before it reached her. This one did not call to the court. It called to her blood. The seal opened. A name burned across the first line. Neria Vale. Neria Froze. Her mother's name. The second line appeared beneath it. Not dead. Not erased. Living. The letters around Neria went silent. Caelan's face changed. Neria. She could not look at him. The red-sealed letter trembled in the air and wrote one final line. Neria Vale's unanswered mate still breathes behind the moon temple doors. And the red thread around the letter began to pulse like a living vein. The moon temple doors answered Neria's mother's name before Neria could breathe. They were not in the Hall of Records. Not truly. And yet the moment the red thread around Neria Vale's letter began to pulse like a living vein, the far wall of the archive darkened, stretched, and filled with the shape of two enormous silver doors. Moon temple doors. Sealed. Buried. Impossible. The court recoiled as the old temple appeared inside the Hall of Records like a memory too large for stone to hold. The doors were carved with wolves facing one another across a crescent moon, but the eyes had been scratched out, and red thread had been sewn through the mouths. Neria held the red-sealed letter with both shaking hands. It beat against her palms. Once, twice, like a second heart. Neria Vale. Her mother's name burned across the first line. Beneath it, the second name still hid under red thread, moving but unread. Living. Neria's throat tightened until breathing hurt. Saravel's voice cut through the blue-white fire. "Do not answer that letter." Neria did not look away from the doors. "You said unanswered does not mean safe. I said unanswered can destroy the living. Then show whether she still chooses." The red-sealed letter flared. Every mate letter in the hall went still. Caelan stood several paces away, his burned right hand marked with vow ink, Neria's name still written across his palm. The letters would not let him step closer. His own bond remained suspended between truth and choice. Pending, not claimed, not restored. Neria felt his gaze on her, but she did not turn to him. This was her mother's letter. Not his pain, not his proof. The red thread around the letter loosened one strand. A vision spilled across the Moon Temple doors. Neria Vale stood years ago in a rain-dark courtyard, younger than Neria had ever seen her in memory, her hair loose, her hands ink-stained like an archive girl's. Across from her stood a man in plain temple gray, tall and wounded, one hand chained to the Moon Temple gate. His face was hidden by shadow, but his voice was not. "Elira," he said, "if they cut the letter, do not let them turn my silence into refusal." Neria's breath broke. The vision shuddered. Saravel lifted her silver needle, but the letters nearest her snapped open like wolves baring teeth. "No more cutting," Neria said. Her voice was not loud. The letters made it law. Saravel's mouth tightened. "Your mother abandoned that vow." The red-sealed letter whipped toward her so violently the archivist stepped back. Ink wrote in the air, "Abandoned vows do not bleed." The red thread pulsed again. Caelan's marked hand burned. He clenched it, jaw tight, but he did not ask Neria to look at him. The letters around his wrist wrote a new line, "Helper, not claimant." The court saw it. Neria saw it. Caelan bowed his head once, accepting the humiliation without defense. Good. If he wanted to stand near truth, he could stand where truth placed him. The Moon Temple doors groaned. A seam of red light opened between them. Inside was not a chapel. It was a corridor of hanging letters. Thousands of them. Some white, some silver, some gray. Some bound in red thread so tightly their ink had turned dark. At the far end, behind the letters, a man knelt in chains before a moonless altar. His throat was wrapped in vow thread. His hands were pinned open by silver script. Alive, breathing, Neria's knees nearly failed. The red-sealed letter opened wider. The second name burned at last. Auramal. The name struck Saravel like a blade. Caelan's eyes sharpened. Orenmail was recorded dead before the old temple fell. Saravel snapped. He was declared dead because the bond made him dangerous. Neria turned on her. Dangerous to whom? The oldest letter answered. To the first lie. The vision deepened. Neria Vale's mate, Orenmail, had not died. He had been locked behind the Moon Temple doors because his bond to Elira proved the old royal mate records had been rewritten. If Elira's letter survived, it would show that Vale blood had not been a servant line by nature. It had been made lowborn because the royal house needed letter blood close enough to use and low enough to silence. Neria's hands went cold. Not princess. Not hidden crown. Worse. Useful blood. The court did not steal a throne from the Vales. It stole their right to answer. Saravel stepped closer, eyes bright with desperation. Listen carefully, girl. If that man speaks, every letter blood record opens. Every house that used your line to store broken vows will be named. Every alliance built from a race choice will shake. Neria looked at the chained man behind the doors. Orenmail lifted his head as if he had heard her breathing. His face was pale, bearded, hollowed by years of silence, but alive. The vow thread around his mouth tightened when he tried to speak. Neria lifted her letter. Can he still choose? The red letter trembled. Caelan's burned hand flared again. You're the moon! He stepped toward the Moon Temple doors. The letters struck his chest and forced him back. He did not fight them. Instead, he lifted his marked palm toward the doors. Use my archive access. Saravel laughed coldly. You think royal blood opens what royal sin sealed? Caelan looked at Neria, not at the archivist. No, but my house locked the outer record. I can open that part. The letters considered him. Then they wrote across his forearm, Open the lock. Not the vow. Caelan nodded. Yes. He pressed his burned palm against the air before the Moon Temple doors. The wolf clasp at his throat cracked. A hidden royal archive seal appeared in blue fire and split open. The Moon Temple doors widened by one handspan. Orenmail gasped behind the red thread. Neria felt the sound like a knife under her ribs. Saravel moved fast. She threw the silver needle toward the red-sealed letter. This time Neria caught the needle in her bare hand. Pain flashed white through her palm. Blood touched the metal. Every letter in the hall froze. Saravel's eyes widened. Neria looked at the blood on her hand, then at the red letter. No more replies stolen before they are spoken. The red-sealed letter drank one drop of her blood, not as sacrifice, as witness. The red thread around Orenmael's mouth loosened. Only a little. Enough. The chained man behind the moon temple doors lifted his head fully. His eyes opened, silver brown, alive with grief. He did not say Alira first. He looked through the open seam, through the storm of burning letters, straight at the archive girl holding his unanswered vow. And he spoke Neria's name, Neria Vale. The hall of records went silent. Neria's heart stopped. Orenmael's voice cracked with years of stolen speech. Your mother did not abandon me. The red-sealed letter burst into blue-white flame. Then, beneath his name and Alira's, a third line began to write itself. Daughter of the unanswered reply. The third line did not finish. It bled. Blue-white ink spread beneath Alira Vale's name and Orenmael's name like a wound, trying to become a sentence. Daughter of the unanswered reply. Neria stared at the words. Not princess. Not chosen bride. Not royal blood. A reply. Something stolen before it could be spoken, yet somehow alive inside her. Behind the moon temple doors, Orenmael strained against the vow thread around his throat. One loosened strand had given him enough voice to speak Neria's name, but not enough freedom to breathe without pain. Saravel whispered, Close the doors. No one moved. Neria tightened her bleeding hand around the silver needle she had caught. No. The red-sealed letter flared. Saravel's eyes sharpened. You do not understand what he is. Then let him answer. He is living proof that the restored moon temple was built on a stolen reply. If he speaks, every letter blood record opens. Oren tried to speak. The vow thread tightened. He choked on silence. Caelan moved too quickly. The letter struck him back before Neria even turned. He stopped, breathing hard, burned vow ink crawling up his wrist. Across his skin, the word remained. Helper, not claimant. Neria looked at him. Why did you move? His face tightened. Habit. The letters did not burn him. Neria almost hated that honesty could still matter. She turned back to the moon temple doors. She lifted the red-sealed letter. Orenmael, do you still choose Alira Vale? The hall went cold. The red thread around the letter pulsed like a living vein. Oren closed his eyes. Then he opened them. Yes. The word scraped out of him like a stone pulled from a grave. The letter flared. And did she still choose you? Saravel struck first. She drove a second silver needle into her own palm. Black ink burst from the wound, and the gray-threaded letter of her own rejected vow wrapped around her wrist like a chain. She hurled it at the red-sealed letter. The impact shattered the vision. Oren vanished behind black writing. Neria cried out as the red letter folded inward, choking on Saravel's ink. Saravel's face twisted. No one gets an answer simply because they still want one. There it was. Not excuse. Wound. Neria saw it clearly. Saravel had once been denied an answer, and she had turned that stolen pain into law. You were taught to call silence mercy, Neria said. Saravel's eyes flashed wet and furious. The oldest letter trembled beside Neria's throat. Caelan stayed where the letters had placed him. Helper, not claimant. Good. Neria lifted the silver needle and dropped it into the blue-white hearth. The fire exploded downward. A line of moonfire tore across the floor to the moon temple doors. Every unanswered letter behind them shone at once. The red-sealed letter unfolded again. Oren reappeared, gasping. This time, the vow thread loosened enough for one sentence. Alira chose. Saravel screamed, liar. The red letter opened a memory. Alira Vale stood before the moon temple doors years ago, blood on her mouth, one hand pressed to her swollen belly. Oren was chained behind the doors, shouting silently through vow thread. Saravel stood before Alira with the same silver needle. Alira lifted a letter in her hand. I choose him, she said. And I choose my child to answer for herself one day. Neria stopped breathing. Her mother had not abandoned the vow. She had refused to let her daughter be owned by it. Alira pressed her bloody thumb to the letter. If my reply is buried, let my blood carry the right to ask again. Not to force, to ask. The memory shattered. The red-sealed letter flew into Neria's hands. Now she understood. Letter blood was not the power to restore every old mate bond. It was the right to ask the question Law had stolen. Do you still choose? The Moon Temple doors opened another inch. Oren Mael lifted his head. The red thread around his mouth fell away. He breathed once. Freely. Neria Vale chose me, he said. I chose her, and we chose that our daughter would never be owned by our unfinished vow. Neria's knees nearly gave out. Caelan stepped forward. The letters snapped toward him. He stopped. His face went pale, but he obeyed. Neria saw it. Not forgiveness. Not bond. Respect. Small. Unwanted. Real. Saravel backed away. If he speaks before the full court, the temple records open. Oren looked at her. They should. The hanging letters behind him began to move. Not wildly. Like witnesses stepping forward. Neria lifted the red-sealed letter. No vow returns by force. The words wrote themselves across the hall of records. No vow returns by force. Caelan's pending bond mark flared on his palm. He closed his hand and lowered it. He did not ask. He did not reach. Saravel saw that and panicked. Seal the living letters. Silver chains shot from the archive walls, wrapping around the unanswered letters. Every locked cabinet burst open, revealing more black cedar chests. Not empty, full of cut replies. Neria went cold. Saravel had not kept one wall. She had kept an entire kingdom of stolen answers. Oren's voice came through the temple doors, weak but clear. Neria, do not open them all through yourself. Too late. The chests began to break. Every cut reply inside the Hall of Records lifted at once. Hundreds. Thousands. The first one struck Neria's chest. Then another. Then another. Neria screamed as every unanswered question in Verhold tried to use her blood as a door. Every unanswered question in Verhold tried to use Neria's blood as a door. The first cut reply struck her chest. Then another. Then dozens. Blue-white ink burst beneath her servant dress, burning across her ribs, throat, and wrists. Each reply carried a question stolen before it reached a mouth. Do you still choose? Did you ever choose? Was I abandoned, or was my answer buried? Neria felt herself thinning, not dying, opening. If she let every reply pass through her, she would become another archive, another wall. Another thing built to carry what others refused to face. Oren Mael's weak voice came from behind the Moon Temple doors. Close your blood, Saravel shouted. This is what letter blood does. It devours the bearer. I sealed them because no body survives being asked by a kingdom. Caelan moved. The letters struck him. This time he forced one knee into the fire ring and pressed his marked palm to the floor. Not through her alone, he said. Burning vow ink tore across his skin, but he did not reach for Neria. The letters wrote over his wrist. Help her, not claim it. Neria looked at him through the storm. He was offering his royal line as a post for the old vows to strike before reaching her. Not innocence. A price. Neria forced air into her lungs. No vow returns by force. The storm faltered. No reply passes through me unless the living voice chooses to speak. One cut reply stopped before her mouth and flew toward a noble lord near the back. His name burned on one side, a servant woman's name burned on the other. The woman stared at the letter, then whispered, I do not choose him. The reply folded into ash, but the ash turned black and wrote another truth. He punished her refusal. A memory appeared. The noble lord dismissing her, erasing her wages, removing her child from household roles. The bond did not return. The consequence did. Neria understood. The replies were not all asking for love. Some were asking for truth after refusal. She lifted the red-sealed letter. Show the choice, then show the consequence. The storm changed. Cut replies stopped rushing into her and began choosing witnesses around the hall. Some became memory. Some waited. Some folded into ash when both living names refused. A few hovered between two wolves who still chose each other, pending by consent. The Hall of Records filled with white, gray, black, and blue light. Notre chaos. Question. Saravel saw control slipping and screamed, Seal them! Silver chains shot from the archive walls, tightening around the northern seam. Several living letters shrieked. Across the hall, nobles clutched their chests as red thread cut under their skin. Neria went cold. Saravel had told the truth. If the wall closed wrong, living wolves tied to unanswered vows would feel the wound. Caelan's burned hand flared against the floor. Ask the wall what it wants. Neria turned to the northern wall. Behind it, Orin lifted his chained hands as far as the silver script allowed. Neria pressed her bleeding palm to the red-sealed letter. Do you want to open? The wall answered in thousands of folded pages, turning at once. Some opened. Some closed. Some moved away. Some pressed toward the seam. Choice. Even the imprisoned letters did not want the same freedom at the same time. Neria breathed through the pain. Then one at a time. The oldest letter flared. One answer at a time. The silver chains loosened by one link. Saravel's face hardened. You cannot turn a prison into a court. Neria looked at her. You turned a court into a prison first. Then Saravel changed tactics. She spoke a command in old archive law, and every shelf in the Hall of Records opened. Marriage contracts, alliance vow, temple decrees, royal betrothal records. They flew into the air like silver blades. If love will ask, Saravel said, then law will answer. The contracts slammed into the waiting mate letters, pinning some to the walls and wrapping others in house seals. One woman screamed as an arranged marriage mark burned black on her wrist. Neria lifted the letter storm, but the contracts were not dead paper. They were signed law. Caelan rose unsteadily. My alliance contract. Neria turned. His face had gone pale. Saravel smiled. The royal shelves opened, and a black-silver contract flew out. At the bottom burned Caelan's name. Beside it was the woman he was arranged to marry at the Winter Oath feast, Lady Vara. The contract unfolded above the hearth like a blade. There, Saravel said, the law your prince still belongs to. Caelan's pending bond mark burned blue-white. The alliance contract burned black-silver. 2 futures. One chosen by ink, one not chosen yet. Neria lifted her chin. Do not look at me, she said. Look at what you signed. Caelan Draven. The alliance contract opened. From inside it, a woman's voice whispered, he signed after they cut his vow. The Hall of Records went silent. The contract turned toward Caelan's throat, then toward Neria's letter storm. Across its black-silver surface, a new line appeared. Royal Alliance built over an unrestored bond. The black-silver contract tightened around Caelan's throat before Neria could read the last line again. Caelan did not move. The vow ink on his marked hand flared blue-white, while the alliance contract burned black-silver against his skin like a collar made from law. Across the Hall of Records, every mate letter stilled, waiting to see whether the Wolf Prince would reach for Neria, defend himself, or hide behind the promise his court had signed for him. He did none of those things. He looked at the contract, not at Neria. Good. Neria's chest still ached from the cut replies that had tried to use her blood as a door. Her palm bled around Neria Vale's red-sealed letter. The northern wall breathed with imprisoned vows, opening only one answer at a time. Saravel smiled. There is your noble helper, archive girl, bound to Lady Vara by law, standing before you with another woman's name burning beside his. The court murmured. Caelan's jaw tightened. The contract cut deeper into his throat. A woman's voice whispered from inside the black-silver ink. He signed after they cut his vow. Neria lifted the red-sealed letter. Who is speaking? The contract unfolded. A vision opened above the hearth. The first pending letter lost its second name. It happened silently. A white gold page hovering near the hearth shuddered once. Then the name on its unanswered side blurred into black ash. The woman standing beneath it cried out and clutched her chest, not because a bond had returned, but because the choice she had never been allowed to make was being stolen again. Then another letter darkened. Then another. Across the Hall of Records, pending vows began turning black at the edges, their ink curling inward, as Saravel's gray-threaded letter burned in the hearth. The fire did not consume paper. It consumed reply. It ate the moment before yes or no, before refusal or acceptance, before a living soul could answer for itself. Neria felt it like fingers closing around her throat. No. The word came out too small. The letters hurt it anyway. The red-sealed letter in her bleeding hand flared against her palm. Behind the Moon Temple doors, Oren Mael strained against his chains, but the silver script pinning his wrists tightened until his breath broke. Lady Vera Marinth stood near the open hall doors, her secret reply still burning in silver light, one hand pressed over the cracked alliance mark at her throat. Caelan was on one knee beside the hearth, the black-silver alliance contract still looped around his arm and neck, his pending mate mark darkening where Neria's name had been written. He looked down at his hand. Not at Neria. Good. If he looked to her now, the letters might think he was asking to be saved. The black fire climbed higher. Saravel stood before it with tears on her face and victory in her eyes. There, she whispered. No more asking. No more ruin dressed as choice. Neria turned toward her. You are killing the answers. I am killing the hunger that answers create. Saravel's voice cracked, but she did not stop. A reply does not heal everyone. It humiliates. It divides. It makes the refused remember what they were not chosen for. Her gray letter burned brighter. Marith Vale's name was almost gone. For one breath, Neria understood the shape of Saravel's wound too clearly. The archivist had waited for a reply that never reached her. Then she had chosen a life where no one else would be allowed to ask. But pain did not become mercy, because it learned to wear law. Neria lifted Alira's red-sealed letter. Marith never answered you. Saravel's eyes flashed. He did not need to. Silence is answer enough. No, Neria said. Silence can be made. The oldest mate letter opened beside Neria's shoulder and wrote the words in blue-white ink across the air. Silence is not reply. The Hall of Records shook. Caelan's marked hand flared suddenly. He drew in a sharp breath as the letters on his skin changed. The word helper burned brighter, then split into another line beneath it. Hold the question. Neria looked at him. Caelan understood before she did. His face went pale. The letters were not asking him to claim her, not asking him to restore their pending bond, not asking him to become noble by suffering. They were asking him to hold the pressure of the unanswered questions long enough for Neria to stop Saravel from burning reply itself. A lock post, not a doorway. Caelan placed both hands flat on the stone. Do it, he said. Neria's chest tightened. You do not know what that costs. His mouth curved without humor. I know my house taught the cost to everyone else first. The letters accepted the answer. Every pending vow in the hall turned toward Caelan. The impact drove him down. Blue-white ink shot across his arms, his throat, his chest, writing hundreds of unfinished questions into his skin. He made no sound at first. Then one harsh breath broke from him, and the alliance contract around his throat snapped tighter. Lady Vera moved forward. Caelan, he shook his head once, not rejecting her, warning her not to step into a cost that was not hers. Neria saw that too. The letters did not burn Vera for stopping. They burned Saravel. The black fire around the archivist's hands flared as Neria stepped toward the hearth. Saravel raised her silver needle-stained palm. Come closer, and every living reply tied to your bloodline burns with mine. Neria stopped. The red-sealed letter pulsed. Oren's voice came faintly from behind the temple doors. Ask Marith. Saravel went still. Neria looked toward the northern wall. Behind the Moon Temple doors, among thousands of hanging letters, one gray page glowed weakly, the other side of Saravel's vow. Marith Vale's reply. Saravel's face hardened with terror. No, Neria did not reach for the page. She had learned. No vow returns by force. She lifted her lantern-bright letter and asked the wall, Does Marith's reply still choose to speak? The gray page trembled. For a moment, it stayed still. Then it moved, slowly, not toward Saravel, toward the hearth. The black fire faltered. Saravel shook her head. He refused me. The gray page opened. A man's voice, old and tired, filled the hall. Saravel, I answered. Your father burned it before you could read. The archivist froze. All color left her face. The gray page unfolded fully, and a memory spilled into the air. Young Marith Vale standing outside the archive gate in winter rain, holding a letter with shaking hands. He spoke to the sealed door, though no one opened it. I choose you if you still choose me, he said. If you do not, I will not shame you. But do not let them tell you I was silent. The memory broke. Saravel stared at the gray letter as if it had killed her. "No," she whispered. The black fire around her hands wavered. Marith's reply did not fly to her chest. It did not bind her. It did not demand love from a woman who had turned her pain into cages. It hovered before her, waiting. Neria's voice softened, but only enough to be human. "Now you can answer." Saravel's mouth trembled. For one fragile moment, the Hall of Records held its breath. Then Saravel laughed. "Broken. Ugly. No." The gray letter dimmed. "I built my life from that silence," she said. "Do you understand? If his answer was stolen, then everything I became was built on a lie I protected." Neria's eyes stung. "Yes." Saravel looked at her with hatred. "Then I choose the lie." She threw both hands into the hearth. The black fire swallowed her arms to the elbow. Marith's gray reply screamed. Caelan collapsed fully to one knee as every pending question struck him harder. The word helper burned nearly white across his throat. The alliance contract around him began to split, unable to hold so many questions at once. Neria did not wait. She plunged Alira's red-sealed letter into the hearth, not to burn it, to ask, "Do you still choose silence?" she demanded. The black fire recoiled. Saravel screamed as the question turned on her. Every letter in the hall opened at once, not to enter Neria, not to bind the living, but to ask one simple thing of the flame-consuming reply. "Do you choose this?" The black fire had no answer, because it was not choice. It was refusal made into law. The hearth cracked. Saravel was thrown backward onto the stone, her arms marked with black ash script. Marith's gray reply fell beside her, intact, waiting, unanswered by her own will now. Caelan gasped as the pressure broke. The pending letters lifted from his skin one by one, leaving burns shaped like question marks and half-written vows. Lady Vera Marinth stepped forward and caught the alliance contract as it fell from his throat. She looked at Caelan, then at Neria, then at her own hidden reply. "I withdraw my forced consent," she said. The contract cracked again. This time the black-silver law did not fight. It folded into two separate pages, one bearing Vera's name, one bearing Caelan's. Neither page burned. "Released. Not restored. Released." Caelan bowed his head to her. "I should have asked before I signed." Vera's voice was cold, but not cruel. "Yes." Neria heard that yes land in him. "Good." The Hall of Records settled into a shaken silence. But behind the Moon Temple doors, the thousands of hanging letters had not gone still. They had opened wider. Orenmael's chains cracked. One silver script pin fell from his hand. Then another. He lifted his freed hand toward the temple corridor behind him. "Neria," he said, voice stronger now. "The replies are safe from Saravel's fire." Neria looked at him. His face darkened. "But the vows themselves are still chained to the Moon Temple altar." The floor beneath the hearth shifted. The old temple doors opened another inch, revealing the moonless altar behind Oren. Upon it lay a book bound in white wolfskin and red thread. Every mate letter in the hall bowed toward it. Caelan's face went cold. "What is that?" Orenmael answered from behind the doors. "The book that decides which bonds are allowed to exist." The oldest letter near Neria's shoulder turned black at the edges. Across the air, one warning wrote itself. "The mate ledger is awake." The white wolfskin book opened before any living hand touched it. Red threads snapped across the moonless altar behind Orenmael, and every mate letter in the Hall of Records dropped several inches in the air as if something had pulled on their throats. Neria felt the pull in her blood. Not toward Caelan, toward the altar. The mate ledger was not calling love. It was calling ownership. Behind the Moon Temple doors, Oren staggered as the last silver script pin tore loose from one hand and buried itself into the book's cover. The ledger drank the metal like a mouth drinking blood. Its pages began turning by themselves, each one filled with paired names written in black, red, and faded silver. Some names glowed. Some had been scratched away. Some were crossed and replaced with house alliances. Neria's stomach turned. This was not a record of bonds. This was the place where choice had been corrected. Saravel lay near the hearth, arms marked by black ash script, Marith Vale's unanswered reply hovering beside her like a wound she refused to touch. She lifted her head and smiled weakly when she saw the ledger open. You can ask letters, she whispered. You cannot overrule the book. Caelan rose slowly, his body still marked with half-burned questions. The word helper remained across his throat, raw and bright. Lady Vera Marinth stood several steps away from him, holding the two separated pages of their broken alliance contract. The ledger turned a page. The two contract pages in Vera's hands jerked toward the altar. She clenched them. No. The book pulled harder. Caelan stepped forward, then stopped himself before touching her. Your choice, he said. Vera's mouth tightened. She held both pages over the nearest blue-white flame and released them. They did not burn. They became silver ash and flew into the air, free of the ledger's pull. The book slammed shut for one breath, then opened again, angrier. A line wrote itself in red across the page, visible through the temple doors. Unapproved release. The floor shook. Every arranged marriage contract in the Hall of Records flared black-silver. Every unanswered letter flared blue-white. The room filled with two kinds of law fighting for the same throats. Neria lifted Alira's red-sealed letter. No vow returns by force, she said. The mate ledger answered by turning another page. A white gold letter near the northern wall screamed as its names were dragged off the paper and rewritten inside the book. The two living wolves beneath it cried out, clutching their chests. The ledger was taking the question before they could answer. Orin slammed his freed hand against the altar from inside the temple seam. It is choosing for them. Neria ran toward the moon temple doors. Caelan moved beside her, not ahead. Good. The letters let him this time, but only barely. The word helper burned brighter across his throat, as if warning him that one wrong reach would turn the fire against him. They reached the seam together. The moon temple doors had opened just wide enough for Neria to see the altar clearly. The mate ledger lay at its center, bound in white wolfskin, red thread, and old moonbone clasps. Each page turned with a soft, wet sound. Neria lifted her bleeding hand. The ledger turned toward her. A line appeared. Neria Vale. Then beside it, Caelan Draven. The whole hall went silent. Caelan stopped breathing. Neria's blood turned cold. The ledger was trying to write them before either of them had chosen. The oldest letter beside her shoulder snapped open with furious blue-white flame. Pending is not consent. The words struck the ledger. The book shuddered. Then wrote again, Royal unrestored bond requires closure. The red thread on the cover tightened. Neria felt an invisible cord wrap around her ribs, pulling her toward Caelan's marked hand. Caelan's fingers curled into a fist, fighting the same pull from the other side. He did not reach for her. He drove his burned hand into the stone floor instead. Do not use my bond as law, he said through his teeth. The ledger's pages turned faster. Names flashed. Marin Vale, Soren Draven, Neria Vale, Oren Mal, Neria Vale, Caelan Draven. Every generation the book had failed to erase fully now pushed toward the same forced correction. Restore one bond publicly, make it symbol, make it precedent, make Neria proof that the ledger could still decide. Neria understood the trap. If the ledger forced her bond with Caelan, Saravel would call it proof that letter blood was dangerous. If Neria rejected him only to stop the book, the ledger would mark refusal as broken fate. If she hesitated, it would write for her. So she stepped back. Not from fear, from ownership. No. The word did not shake. The ledger paused. Neria lifted Alira's letter and spoke to the hall, not to Caelan. A bond that cannot survive a question is not a bond. A law that cannot wait for answer is not law. The mate letters flared around her. Caelan bowed his head, pain crossing his face like a blade, but he stayed silent. That silence mattered now. It was not avoidance. It was room. Neria turned to Orin. How do we stop the book? Orin looked at the mate ledger with hatred older than his chains. It was made from the first mate letter the royal house cut. It believes every vow must end in command because its first page was never answered. Neria's eyes moved to the book. The first page, she said. The ledger snapped shut. Too late. The oldest letter shot toward it and wedged itself between the covers. Blue-white fire erupted. The book screamed. Pages flew open again, flipping backward through centuries of rewritten bonds until they reached the beginning. The first page was blank, not empty, scraped clean. Neria felt the horror of it in her teeth. Someone had removed the first names. Saravel pushed herself up on one elbow, face pale. No one knows what was written there. The first page began to bleed red ink. Oren whispered. Morel took the names out. First Luna Merrill Draven, the breaker of the first vow, the royal house's first knife. Neria looked at the blank page. Then asked what remains. The oldest letter opened over the page. Every unanswered letter in the hall turned toward it. Neria spoke carefully. First page, do you still hold a choice? The blank page trembled. For a moment, nothing happened. Then 2 handprints appeared. One silver, one red. Not names. Hence. Pressed together before someone scraped them away. The room changed. The mate ledger had not begun as command. It had begun as consent. 2 people had pressed their hands to the first page and chosen each other. Then Morel had erased the names and kept the structure. A vow book became a control book. Caelan's voice came quietly beside Neria. My house did this. Neria looked at him. Yes. No comfort. No softening. Truth first. He accepted it. The ledger shook violently. Red thread lashed from the altar and wrapped around Oren's throat again, pulling him down. More threads shot toward Neria, Caelan, and the floating letters. The book would rather strangle the living than become witness. Neria lifted both hands. Do not fight the book, she said. The letters hesitated. Ask it. The storm of letters went still. Then, one by one, they turned toward the mate ledger and opened. Not attacking. Asking, do you still choose command? Do you still choose erasure? Do you still choose to write before answer? The ledger thrashed on the altar. Its red thread snapped one strand at a time. Saravel screamed, Books do not choose! Neria turned to her. Then no book should choose for us. The first page burned blue-white. A word appeared where the erased names had been. Answer. The mate ledger cracked down its spine. Oren's throat thread snapped. The unanswered letters behind the Moon Temple doors surged forward, but Neria raised one hand. One at a time, she said. They obeyed. But the cracked ledger was not finished. From its torn spine, a final black page rose. Unlike the others, this page had no paired names. Only one command written in royal ink. If letter blood returns, bind the bearer as living ledger. Neria's blood went cold. Caelan stepped in front of her. The letters struck him back instantly. Helper, not shield. The black page flew straight toward Neria's chest. Oren shouted her name. Caelan hit the floor. The red-sealed letter flared in Neria's hands. But the black page wrapped around her heart before she could lift it. For one breath, every mate letter in the Hall of Records turned toward Neria, waiting for her to write them. The mate ledger had failed to command the vows, so it had made her the book. The first name carved itself beneath Neria's skin. She gasped. Not from pain alone, from the wrongness of it. Black ink spread across her chest under the servant dress, forming paired names she had never chosen to carry. The mate ledger's final page tightened around her heart like a cover closing over a book. Every letter in the Hall of Records turned toward her, waiting for her blood to decide what the old ledger no longer could. Neria staggered. Caelan pushed himself up from the floor, but the letters snapped in front of him. Helper, not shield. He stopped with a sound like a broken breath. Good. Even now, even terrified, the letters would not let him turn her body into his redemption. Oren Mael gripped the edge of the Moon Temple altar from behind the doors. His throat was free at last, but his wrists were still scarred by silver script. Neria, he called. Do not write. Neria's mouth opened. No answer came. The black page pressed harder. A second pair of names burned over her ribs. Then a third. Around the hall, letters began unfolding toward her as if she were a desk, a shelf, a wall, a law. The old danger returned in a new shape. If Saravel had made the letters prisoners, the Mate ledger would make Neria their prison keeper. Saravel, still marked by black ash and unanswered grief, laughed weakly from the floor. There. That is what your mercy becomes. A girl made into structure. Neria lifted her shaking hands. Ink crawled toward her wrists. No, she had not broken walls to become one. Caelan looked at his burned palm, where Neria's name still glowed under the pending mark. Then he turned to the letters, not to her. Ask me what my house owes. The Hall of Records went still. The black page around Neria's heart paused. Caelan knelt fully before the storm of letters, head bowed. burned hand open. My house cut the first vow. My house used the temple to turn choice into alliance. My house made veil blood low enough to use and quiet enough to blame. His voice roughened. Do not make her the ledger, because Draven blood refuses to be read. The letters moved toward him. Not all. Enough. Blue-white lines burned across his arms and throat, writing old Draven crimes into his skin. He did not flinch away. He did not look at Neria for reward. The pressure around her heart loosened by one breath. Neria inhaled. Then Lady Vera Marinth stepped forward, holding the ash of her broken alliance page. House Marinth signed what we were told would save us, she said, but we also accepted silence when it protected our lands. She lifted her chin. Ask us too. A noblewoman followed, then the old border lord, then a temple priest whose hands shook. Not everyone, not enough, but more than one. That mattered. One by one, the letters turned away from Neria and toward the houses that had fed the ledger. Names wrote themselves across sleeves, hands, throats, banners, white for truth carried, black for vows cut, gray for silence bought by fear. Neria clutched Alira's red-sealed letter against her chest. The black page fought back. It dragged her knees toward the floor and forced a line of royal ink across her collarbone. Living ledger must remain. Neria bared her teeth. No. The word tore through the hall. Not loud. Final. The oldest letter hovered beside her cheek, blue, white, and wounded. Neria pressed her bleeding palm to it. Ask me. The letter trembled. Then wrote, Do you choose to carry what is not yours? Neria's answer came without hesitation. No. The black page cracked. Every mate letter in the hall shuddered. Neria spoke again, stronger. I choose to witness. I do not choose to carry. I choose to ask. I do not choose to answer for the dead, the living, the crown, the temple, or the houses. The red-sealed letter flared. Oren Mael smiled through tears behind the temple doors. Caelan closed his eyes, as if the words hurt and freed him at once. The black page around Neria's heart split open. Ink poured out of her skin and flew back into the air, no longer shaped as law, only as names waiting to be asked by their rightful voices. The mate ledger screamed from the altar. Neria turned toward it. Books may remember, she said. They do not choose. The old letters answered. Books remember. Living souls choose. The words wrote themselves across the ceiling of the Hall of Records, across the Moon Temple doors, across every royal shelf and sealed cabinet. The white wolfskin ledger cracked fully down its spine. Red thread snapped. The first page opened again, showing the two erased handprints, one silver, one red. Slowly, the marks brightened. Not names, not command. Consent. The ledger did not vanish. It changed. Its pages emptied of forced pairings, leaving only spaces for witness, answer, refusal, and chosen vow. Saravel stared at it as if watching a god die. No, she whispered. Without the ledger, how will houses know what is lawful? Neria looked at her. They will have to ask. Marith Vale's gray reply still hovered beside Saravel. Waiting. Saravel did not touch it. Not yet. That was her punishment now. Not silence, but the answer she could no longer destroy. The Moon Temple doors opened. Oren Mael stepped out slowly, one hand braced against the frame, thin and scarred but alive. The hall bowed backward from him, not out of rank, but because a buried answer had become flesh. He stopped before Neria. His eyes searched her face as if looking for Alira and finding someone else entirely. You are not our unfinished vow, he said. Neria's throat tightened. Oren bowed his head to her. You are the reply she protected. The red-sealed letter between them softened. Alira Vale's name and Oren Mael's name glowed once, then folded together, not binding, not restoring the dead, not dragging Neria into their love. It became witness and settled into Oren's hands. He held it like a grave and a sunrise. Caelan stood several steps away. Still pending. Neria turned to him. The hall held its breath. The mark on his palm burned with her name. He opened his hand and did not move closer. I will not ask tonight, he said. The letters listened. Caelan's voice was low. Not while your blood is still bleeding from what my house helped build. Not while my name is still written by wounds more than choice. Neria felt the bond between them tremble. It did not vanish. It did not complete. It waited. Pending. By consent. Good. Lady Vera Marinth stepped forward and placed her released alliance page into the new ledger. My answer is refusal. The page accepted it and turned silver. A noblewoman placed hers next. My answer is memory only. The page accepted it. Two wolves who still chose each other placed their hands over a waiting letter. Our answer is yes. The page accepted it. The Hall of Records changed one answer at a time. By dawn, the northern wall no longer held cages. The unanswered letters remained in the open archive, arranged not by rank or house, but by whether they waited, witnessed, released, or chose. The black cedar chests were broken. The silver chains hung empty. The old temple doors stood open. Saravel was not killed. Neria would not let the court turn another woman into a neat ending. The former High Moon archivist was stripped of her keys and bound to answer before every letter she had kept imprisoned. Marith Vale's reply hovered near her shoulder, gray and patient, waiting for the one answer she could not command. Caelan did not reclaim the court's trust. He began paying for it. He ordered every Royal Alliance contract reviewed before the open letters, then placed the Draven records first. Not as heroism, as debt. Neria remained an archive girl no longer. Not because a prince's vow led to her. Not because the court suddenly saw her as noble. Because when every stolen answer tried to make her its door, she refused to become another prison. At sunrise, she stood in the Hall of Records, with Alira's red thread wrapped around her unbound wrist, holding the oldest letter in her hands. Caelan stopped several steps away. Enough space for refusal. What will you do now? He asked. Neria looked at the open moon temple doors, then at the letters waiting in the morning light. I will ask, she said, and I will let the answer belong to the one who gives it. The oldest letter glowed softly. Across its page, one final law wrote itself in blue-white ink. No vow returns by force. Neria lifted her chin and walked into the open archive. Not as proof, not as property, not as the prince's restored mate. She was letter blood. The last living reply,